Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of the podcast, and we are continuing our study of the first book of Kings, that is Malachim Aleph. We are in the middle of Perek Hey, that is chapter 5. We are at verse 16. In the last podcast, we discussed the spread of the great reputation of Shlomo HaMelech, of King Solomon, in his wisdom and in how he wrote all these proverbs and songs and lectured on science and the trees and nature, and how people from all over the world would come. Then one specific king, the king of Tyre, name is Hiram, specifically was singled out as someone who had heard the great reputation of Shlomo, and he had a particular pride in seeing Shlomo in this great and grand position that he was in, because he had been close with David, with his father, and he was proud to see how his son took over and did such a beautiful job in building up such an incredible kingdom. So he sent a delegation to Shlomo, and that's what we had read about in verse 15, that he sent a delegation. Presumably it was a delegation of peace, a delegation simply to show solidarity and support. And when Shlomo, after this meeting, Shlomo sent back a message to Hiram as follows, and that's what we're about to read. Vayishlach Shlomo el Hiram lemar. And Shlomo sent a message back to Hiram saying as follows: Ato yodato, you know, David Avi, my father David, ki lo yachol livnot bayit. You know that he was not able to build a house l'shem Adonai Elohav, in honor of the Lord his God, mipnei hamilchama asher sivavu, because he was involved in war. He was involved so much in conquest and defending the land and in subduing the enemies that threatened the people of Israel. Adonai Osam, until he kept fighting those words until the point where God placed them under his hands, tachas kapos raglov, or ragloi, depending on how you read it. In other words, God placed them underneath his feet. In other words, David conquered them, or the way it is read, underneath my feet. In other words, David did all the conquering, and now I have my enemies subdued, so I am now at peace, and now I can turn to the building of the house. One of the things that I want to point out that we're gonna be reading is that when it came time to build the house, Shlomo had to look to a Gentile nation for the support in order to build the house, because David, as we'll see in a minute, Solomon needed the raw materials, he needed the expertise that they had in order to build the house. This is a very strong lesson in the purpose of the temple, and Solomon will point this out when he dedicates the temple later. Now, we're not going to read that part today, but we will soon enough, that the purpose of the temple is for the entire world, is so that the everyone in the world should look to God. Ultimately, that's the goal, and it's not coincidental that it required the help of other nations. First, the nations that are close to Israel, that are friendly, that work with Israel, and hopefully, eventually, throughout the entire world, will get that message and all work together and be close. So v'ata, and now, this is verse 18. Now Solomon says, this is still his message to Hiram, the king of Tyre, Heiniach Adonai Elohai li misaviv, God left me peace surrounding me. Ein satan v'ein pegara. I have no one working against me. I have no one trying to harm my nation. So v'hineni omer, and therefore I decided, I told myself that it's time, livnot bayit, to build a house l'shem Adonai Elohai, in the honor of the Lord my God. Kasher diber Adonai el David avi lemar, just like God had spoken to my father David with the following message: Bincha asher etein tachtecha al kisecha, that your son, that I shall place in your stead upon your throne, hu yivneh habayit l'shmi, he will be the one who, with the honor, to build the house in my name. And now, Tziva v'yichrusu li arazim. This is a request that Solomon is making to Hiram. Tzaveh, command, v'yichrusu li, and there should be cut down for me cedar trees, min halevanon, from the Lebanon, from the forests of Lebanon. Va'avodai yiyu im avodecha, and my servants shall come and work with your servants. Usachar avodecha etein lach, and I will, of course, give you the payment. I'll pay you to pay your servants. Kechol asher tomar, whatever price you say you need. Because you know, we don't have anyone that has the skill and the knowledge and the know-how in to cut trees like the people from Sidon, the people from Sidon, who were obviously under the rule of Tyre. So Shlomo is saying, I'll send you my workers, I'll send you my money, whatever you need so that you can afford to do this for us, but we need your expertise and we need your raw materials, your timber. When Hiram heard the words, the request of Solomon, he was very happy. And he said, Baruch Adonai Hayom, blessed be God today, Asher Nasan David ben Chacham, that he gave for David a wise and intelligent son, Al Ha'am Ha'arav Azeh, to rule over this great big nation that he is ruling over. Hiram was very impressed that Shlomo had the initiative and understood what needed to be done, and that he turned to him and gave Hiram the privilege of being involved in the building of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Vayishlach Hiram al Shlomo le'mar. So Hiram's answer to Shlomo was as follows: Shamati, I have heard Es asher sholachta elai. I have heard that message which you have sent to me. Ani e'eseh es kol chavtzecha, I'll do whatever you request. Ba'atzei arazim, with cedar wood, uva'atzei v'roshim, and cypress wood. I will make sure you have everything you need. Avodai yoridu min halavanon yama. My servants will bring them down from the forests of Lebanon, bring them down to the shore. Vani asimem dovros bayam ad hamakom asher tishlach elai. And I will make them into, so they would tie the boards together, not the boards, the logs together, right? I will tie them together as rafts in the sea, and I will float them down to wherever place you want them to. V'ni patztim sham, and then wherever we deliver them to, we will take them apart. V'atot tisa, and then you can carry them up to where you're building. V'atot ta'aseh et chavtzi laseis lachem beitzi. And what I'm going to request in payment is that you support my royal house with this following, with the price that I'm going to lay out. So vayhi Hiram nosein l'shamo hatzei arazim hatzei v'roshim kol chavtzo. So this plan was what happened. Hiram then supplied Shlomo, Solomon, with all of the cedar and cypress wood that he required. So now Shlomo had the raw materials that he needed to build the house. Shlomo nasan l'Hiram, and the price that Shlomo paid Hiram for this was Esrim Elef Kor Chitim, was 20,000 cores as a measurement of wheat, makoles lebeso, which was provisions for the royal household, the esrim kar shemen kasis, and 20 core of oil, crushed oil, oil that was crushed from olives. Ko yitain Shlomo leChiram shana b'shana. For year to year, this is what Shlomo gave to Hiram as payment. So it was a good deal that was made. V'Adonai nasan chachma leShlomo. God had given wisdom to Shlomo. Ka'asher diber lo, just like he had said, just like God had stated to David that he would have a son who would know to do this. God had given Shlomo wisdom. V'ayihi shalom ben Hiram ben Shlomo, and there was a peace between the two nations, between Hiram, the king of Tyre, and Shlomo, the king of Israel. Vayichsu rishnehem, and they made a treaty between them. Vayal HaMelech Shlomo mas mikol Yisrael, and Shlomo had to do his part of the deal also and supply workers. So he made a mas, which is sometimes means a tax of money. Here it means a tax of labor from the people of Israel. Vayia mas 30,000 ish, and so he took 30,000 men of Israel, and they were sent up to Tyre to help with the cutting of timber. Vayishlachem levanona, he sent them up to Lebanon. 10,000 per month. and then they would come back, and then 3 months later, the 10,000 would go, and that's how it worked. Chodesh Yu Balvanon, they were there in Lebanon for a month. Shnaim Chodeshim Beveso, and 2 months at home. Va'adoni Ram al Hamas, and Adoni Ram was the person who was in charge of this labor force. So this way, the men would not have to spend that much time away from home. So it was a reasonable arrangement: 2 months at home, 1 month at work. Vayehi l'Shlomo shivim elef nosei sabol, and Shlomo had this seems to be a little bit of a diversion here, a little bit of a going off course. This doesn't seem because this isn't related to the work in Lebanon, but now we're discussing the workers that were hired for the work of the building of the temple, or not necessarily hired. It was a mas; they were forced to do so. But so we just mentioned that the 30,000 workers that were slated to work in Lebanon. So there was also Shlomo had Vayil Shlomo Shivim Elef Nosei Sabol, 70,000 carriers, people that carried loads, Ushmonim Elef Chotzev Bahar, and 80,000 quarriers, people working in the quarries, cutting stone, also for the building. Levad Misorei Hanitzavim. This is in addition to the people in charge, the officers that had to organize this massive labor force. We just listed a labor force of 70,000 carriers, 80,000 quarriers, and 30,000 timber workers. So that's a total of 180,000 people. So Asher al HaMelacha. So it's the officers that were in charge were a separate number of Shloshes Alafim Ushlosh Meos. That's 3,300 Harodim Ba'am that were in charge of the people. Ha'osim Ba'melacha. Rodim is that they were in charge, but they also there was a forced aspect to this. They were required to do this by the king. Vayitzav HaMelach, and the king commanded, Vayasiu Avonim Gedolos, and they brought great big stones, Avonim Mikaros, very precious and valuable stones, Liyaseid Habayis Avne Gozes, in order to build a foundation for the house out of stones that were cut. In other words, cut, hewn, nice stones, ready to be placed as foundation stones. So, Vayifsulu Bonei Shlomo Bonei Hiram V'Hagivlim, and the builders of Shlomo and the builders that came from Hiram, right? Those that came from Lebanon, the Hagivlim, and people from Gevel, which is apparently another nation of people that had specific skill in stonemasonry. So all of these people worked together by Achinu Ha'itzim Va'avanim B'Levanos Habayis, and they all prepared the stones and the wood in order to build the house. So the first thing was getting the raw materials together, and that's what we studied in this chapter just now. This is the last verse in this chapter, was getting together the raw materials necessary to build the house. Interestingly, again, one thing to point out is that we have other nations helping in the building of the house, which is going to be one day the Beit Tfilah L'chol Ha'amim, the house of prayer for all nations. This is different than the house that one nation builds with its personal national God. This is something new. This is something different. This is something special, something that has a mission for the entire world. Thank you so much for studying chapter 5 together. Looking forward to studying chapter 6 as we continue, and of course the rest of this book of Kings, and as we continue with the building of the temple, of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem by Shlomo, by King Solomon. Have a wonderful day.